What is our relationship with the flora and the fauna? It's our relationship with all the living things on our planet. From a biblical point of view, the starting point is Genesis 1, 26 to 28, which has guided Christian thinking on this question since its beginning. And Genesis 1 says this: Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in the image of God. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the face of the earth." Two words are important in this passage: dominion and subdue. These words, like its context, come from the time of ancient kingly rule, where the king was responsible for the realm over which he ruled. At this time, as we mourn the loss of our Queen Elizabeth II, interesting to reflect upon the power of the kingship and the Queen in our context. But millennia ago, the king ruled over all, but was responsible for the protection and the preservation of the realm. Exploitation and disregard for the well-being of the realm were abuses of power. The ancients regarded God as overall king, king of all creation, believing that God created and cares for and protects all of creation. So humans who are made in the image of God are given the responsibility for all that God has made and oversees. Humans were to be the servants of the king, carrying out the king's mandate over all creation. But we have abused the power that we have been given. We've sought to become like a false god, a bad king in our dealings with creation, exploiting and ignoring the well-being of the environment. We have interpreted dominion as domination and subduing as exploitation. The Old Testament scholar Klaus Westermann, in his commentary on this passage 50 years ago, I pulled this off the shelf as one of the books we were reading when I was studying college, he says this: "What is decisive is the responsibility of humans for the preservation of what has been entrusted to us. And we can show this responsibility by exercising our royal office of mediator of prosperity and well-being, like the kings of the ancient world." He goes on to say, "Scientific and technical progress cannot and must not be stopped, but our responsibility for the environment, which belongs to every human being, must be aroused." Over the last 50 years, that responsibility has been too slowly, aroused. Now we are beginning to pay attention to our responsibility for all creation. But what is God's relationship with the natural world? In the beginning, Christian theology was closely connected to the worldview of the heaven above and the earth below. It was easy then to picture God overseeing all that God had created. Jesus was said to have come down from heaven, from the Father, And finally, Jesus ascended to the Father in heaven. Heaven, the sky, was the realm of God, and from which God could look out over all of creation. The earth then was the realm of the humans and all that had been created. Humans who had the dominion over the natural world and the divine mandate to subdue it. We were regarded as God's representatives on the earth. The problem was that dominating and subduing went to our heads as human beings. And our dominion became exploitation, and our subduing became desecration. Where was God as we exploited and desecrated God's good creation? Initially, God was thought about as being up there in heaven. But as Western thought developed, it was discovered that the Earth was in fact a planet, was an orb orbiting the sun with other planets in a solar system. And as the discoveries went on, discovered we were just one of millions of solar systems in our galaxy, and our galaxy was just one of millions of galaxies in the universe. God was pushed further and further out of the physical universe until God really disappeared from Western scientific thought. And God became a personal God. And our concern was for a personal salvation from the physical world. Little was thought about our responsibility for creation. But the scripture tells us, and this is in Jesus' conversation with the woman of Samaria, that God is spirit. And those who worship God must worship in spirit and in truth. So God is not found in the physical universe, but in the spiritual dimension. I was alarmed when I was a young man, and a discussion about where was God when a university student said to me, "Oh, God is on another planet out there, the universe." And that was our problem as Christians. And that was the problem of Christian theology. If we located God within the physical universe, as we used to, God up in the sky, then as the physical universe got bigger and bigger, God got further and further away until God disappeared from relevance. So God, as spirit, is in a different dimension. God is as distant as the farthest galaxy, but as close as our next breath. Christian theology has often failed to address the false understanding of where God is. It has perpetuated a view of God up there, a view that has long since become outdated. Indeed, as we listen to others and their understandings of God and the nature of the world and the spiritual reality, Indigenous theologies are often closer to a contemporary understanding of God. We have much to learn from them in their understanding of where the Spirit dwells. God as Spirit is present in all things. When that's been talked about, some people claim that, oh, that's pantheism. It's not. Pantheism is God and the universe are one. God is in all things as a spiritual reality, but God is not one with the physical world. God is beyond, but within the physical world. Somebody termed the word pantheism. God is in all things. God is with us. How else can we understand our confession that God is with us? The Spirit is as close as our next breath and as distant as the farthest galaxy. Such is the awesome nature of God. This is how I make sense of the presence of God today and how God continues to act and react with creation. But really that's a mystery to me. The book of Job is helpful for this, I believe, as we grapple with this question of how God is the creator and the sustainer of the world as we understand the world today. God addresses Job with, well, what do you know? Where were you in the beginning? Do you know the ways of all the plants and the animals? How much do we really know about creation? Sure, there's a lot of scientific inquiry about how creation works, the ways of the plants, the ways of the animals. We might think we know a fair bit. I think we only know a very little bit. It seems we've known enough to be dangerous to creation, the world in which we live here, and not enough to be good stewards of what God has entrusted to us. As Christians, we affirm our faith in God as creator and the sustainer of all things. How God has done and continues to do this remains a mystery to us. And why we worship God as being beyond us. Finally, our human understanding comes to an end as we stand before the awesomeness of God. God is present to the plants and the animals, just as much as God is present to us. Images of God as the gardener, caring for plants, and as the shepherd, caring for animals, convey this truth. Jesus said, if God cares about other parts of creation as God does, we need not worry. What a great message. God cares for us. When we look at the world around us and how things, I'm not much of a gardener, I'm amazed at how things grow without my attention. So much happens that is unknown to us. God says that if God cares about other parts of creation as God does, we need not worry. God cares for us. God is present with us. His Spirit constantly comforts and guides us. So God is not only a personal God, God is the Lord of all creation. And we should note carefully our responsibility to creation as those who are made in the image of God. We have wanted to become like God, as the story in Genesis 3 tells us. We have sought to dominate and exploit the natural world, but we are not gods. We are servants of the living God. We need to accept our place as God's creatures with a special relationship with God and a special relationship for God's good creation. We need to be working with God for the preservation and the well-being of all living things. Amen.